Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Toughness, and today we're talking about what else? Mental toughness. So, CSCCa is putting a lot of emphasis on the continuing education of coaches, you. So, we decided to do this specific video as part of the CEU program. So you will have ask a couple of questions in order to get the CEUs, and we're going to talk about a few things today. So grab your coffee and let's go. So this thing is working. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to cover a few things that I've covered in my presentations in the CCA conferences and a lot of conversations with you, but we're going to go over some new evidence. We're going to talk about what is mental toughness, which is important. Why do we care so much? Why do we talk about it that much? Why do we see it on ESPN that much? So that is important to cover. And then we will talk about the potentially dark side of mental toughness. Is there times that having high levels of mental toughness may end up in non positive as we would expect? We'll cover that today. And we will kind of relate it to the survey that we just sent out, April and May 2023. So this will be very contextual in terms of not only talking about mental toughness, strength and conditioning, but in strength and conditioning, and specifically based on your answers in the survey that we sent out. All right, let's start. So just a reminder, and I'm going to show that later on. We send you the mental toughness index, which is a good tool to use when you're measuring mental toughness on the beginning of April. And that was our baseline measurement. And then we chose some of you that had a low score at least in one question, and we sent them one video. That's not a question. Actually, we didn't send more than one. And 2 weeks later, we resend them the mental toughness index. So after the video, they took mental toughness index to see if their mental toughness went up based on the baseline. And then 2 weeks later, at the end of April, we send it out again to see if they retained those levels. At the same time, 2 weeks after the baseline, we sent out the mental toughness index again, MTI, to see what happened with the people that we didn't send them the video. We didn't send them the intervention. So we ended up with, as I just described, we have the baseline of April, and then we have two groups. So we have an experimental design, control group, and an intervention. Just a reminder, and we can talk about that more as we go. So what is mental toughness? The definition is at the bottom. Okay, it is a capacity, a psychological resource that, in the simplest terms possible, gives us the skills to face adversity, obstacles, as we are trying to achieve a goal. So we are at point A, we want to go to point B. As we are trying to, that things will happen because things always happen. So mental toughness is the resource that will give us the tools to face that adversity and go over under whatever those obstacles and reach our goal. And as you can see, it consists of 8 things, 8 key dimensions: tension regulation, emotion regulation, self-efficacy, and so on. And all of them over time assimilate and become that one thing that we call mental toughness. This is a mental toughness index. You see the reference at the bottom. So if you want to find it, it's free. You can download it and use it. And as you also see, we have 8 questions. And if I don't know if you remember that I just talked about 8 key dimensions. So what happens here is the questionnaire is based obviously on the conceptualization. So each item, each question corresponds 1 key dimension. So for example, number 8, I can find a positive emotional situations, that optimism. Or number 1, I believe in my ability to achieve my goals, that's self-efficacy. And the 1 to 7 in that figure that I created wasn't random. As you can see, the range is from 1, false, all the time, to 7, true, all the time. Now, how do those 8 key dimensions come together? What's the common ground? The common ground is that all these key dimensions have to do with some goal. There's a purpose. If there's no goal, you can't develop mental fitness. Okay? They're all flexible. They can go up and down depending on the situation. And they are efficient. They are helping us using, for example, the same amount of resources, but to perform more outcomes or better outcomes. That's the common ground of all these key dimensions. And from now on, and for the most part of this presentation, I am going to have 2 slides per dimension. The very first slide will look like this. Have the definition and an example that we're going to talk about. And the second slide about the same key dimension is going to talk about the dark side, the having too much of whatever, in this case, optimism. So we're going to go one by one, but we're going to do that for all 8 key dimensions. And that's why I mentioned to grab a coffee or a beverage or something, because it will take us a minute. All right, let's start. So I'm sure you know people that have, on average, a tendency to think negatively about life, what to expect. And I'm also, you can think of people that have a tendency to think positively about things that happen in life and things that will happen in the future as well. Optimists. Do we want to be optimists? Absolutely. Because the literature shows, and it's very clear, that optimists live healthier lives, they achieve more goals, they have more motivation. On the contrary, pessimists have more anxiety and depression, give up easier, and socially, let's be honest, they're not super successful because we tend to want to be around positivity, positive people. So the question is, can I become an optimist? So I'm going to say that now, and that applies on all 8 key dimensions, and as a consequence on mental toughness overall. Mental toughness is partially innate, but also there are parts that we can't develop. So in our case right here, in the case of optimism, we can learn, we can develop. And is that good? That's exciting. That's amazing. Because mental toughness, as we said, helps us achieve goals. Therefore, helps us perform better. If we learn how to have those skills and retain those skills, develop those skills, then we will be more successful. So we will see as we go that a lot of times we can choose and become more successful. And that's what we're doing right now. So there are many ways to see optimism. This is one of the main ones. So when something happens, we can interpret it in many ways. One way to see things, to filter things, is the so-called explanatory style, or the 3 Ps: personal, permanent, and pervasive. So in this case, we have Liam, who's a very good athlete, plays very well during practices, but not so good during games. And he's a pessimist. When he's missing a chance to score, he takes all the responsibility. He thinks that the same thing will happen again during the game. And as a student athlete, when he has a bad game, that spills over to other parts of his life, such as the academic part. What we are trying to achieve through the explanatory style, mainly, and I want you to remember that, is to dispute all negative self-talk, all negative thoughts. It is proven that we have thousands of unique thoughts per day. So we talk to ourselves all the time. Our goal through the explanatory style is to detect the negativity, dispute it, and for the most part, that's what the literature says, the negative talk is wrong. So dispute it all the time and flip it towards something positive. And you can see the examples of how Liam could interpret the same event. So optimism is a choice. That's something we should remember. I understand that it's very difficult when something bad happens. It's super easy when everything goes well with you. But these are the soft skills that we can learn before something happens in order to react in a positive way when something like this happens. I talked about coffee. Okay, good. Let's say I woke up this morning and I spilled my coffee all over. I'll use a very simple example. Okay. I can start cussing out and say that, think that my whole day will go this way. And I let it spill over to other people as well when I come to work. Or I can just be upset about it. Absolutely. I don't like it. I don't want it to happen again. Right? But I can solve it locally. I can see as a random, independent event that happened. Maybe it wasn't me. Maybe the mild amnesia, once I tried to grab it, it just broke. And then coffee came all over me, right? And just leave it there and not take it with me for the rest of the day. So since I mentioned the pervasive and the permanent, I want to stay a little bit in the personal side. Optimists are not selfish people. We're not trying to say that you're trying to accuse other people left and right. But most of the time, when something happens, it's not 100% our responsibility. So we don't say, stop being responsible. We say, be realistic and take the weight that you should take. Don't take all of it, because most of the time, yes, maybe you could practice a little bit more to be successful in sport. But also, that past wasn't very, very good. And you have 3 people around, and who knows what else. So do not try to take more weight on you, because that's pessimists. They have that negative self-fulfilling prophecy that they're trying in a weird way to accomplish. Right? And be responsible for what you do. Now, can you be overly optimistic? Now we're going to talk about the bad side. Yes. And mental toughness and all the things that we're going to talk about today are part of positive psychology. Martin Seligman is the father of positive psychology, and he said that optimists are as much slaves of the tyrannies of optimism as pessimists are of the tyrannies of pessimism. Why did he mean by that? We're not telling people to be optimists just to be optimists. And Seligman is using an example that I would like to use. It's a very to the point example. When we fly, when a pilot is in the plane, on the plane, and before they take off, they do an extensive pre-flight check. Correct? They do the pre-flight check, and then they are optimistic about it. We don't want a pilot, obviously, next time we fly that says, you know what? Let's not put any fuel. I'm very optimistic that we can fly over the Atlantic and just land it to Greece. No, we're not saying that at all. So that would be a very risky situation and we shouldn't be optimistic. It's the same thing with an athlete. we tell them, you know, I want you to be optimistic about the game. But before we come to Sunday, whatever that game is, you have to train intentionally every day. You have to hydrate. You have to eat all your meals. You have to do all the preparation that is necessary, including sleep, hygiene, and so on and so forth. So then, after you do all that, absolutely be optimistic. So I would like you to remember that when there's a very risky situation that you haven't been proactive, proactivity is huge because of psychology and specifically toughness. We shouldn't. We should be very careful. Let's go to the next one. Emotion regulation. Use whatever is relevant in terms of emotion in order to achieve that goal. All right. So on the figure, the graph figure, on the left side, when do we have to deal with emotions? Let's see. On the right side, you see we have 4 specific steps, and that's a feedback loop, a closed loop. What happens there? First of all, it has to be a situation that's relevant to you. If it's not relevant, it's not going to affect you emotionally. So if it is relevant, then it will require some kind of appraisal. So it has your attention, it will require some appraisal. You can say it's negative or positive, whatever. And based on that, you will act. And that action will affect the situation again. Let me give you an example. It's Monday morning, you're driving to work, flat tire. Not good. We have 2 choices, similar to the example I gave. I can come get out, kick the tire 10, 15, 100 times, be very upset about it, say, you know, oh my God, why me? I knew it would be me. My whole week will go bad, blah, blah, blah. And whenever eventually I go to work hours later, I spill that negativity over to everybody. That's a feedback loop that affects the next event, the next situation, right? Or I can be upset about it for 3-5 minutes, change the tire. So again, emotion regulation, and is their choice, right? Now, what kind of mechanisms, what kind of models do we have to regulate our emotions? 5 of them on the list. 2 of them are before something happens, 4 and 5 is after something happens, and the 3rd one is once. So before it happens, so if we work together and yesterday you had a bad game or something happened, and you know that as your supervisor, I will come at you next time, affect you emotionally, but it won't really solve anything. Protect yourself. And in general, don't put yourself in a situation that affects you negatively in terms of emotion, because usually we're trying to decrease negative and increase positive, right? Usually, I'm not going to go into more detail. So avoid it. Now, number 2, situation modification. Let's say you can avoid it because we have a meeting and we have to do it. All right. What if you come earlier and you bring donuts and coffee for everybody, and you try to modify the situation as much as possible, or you are as respectful as possible, or apologetic, I don't know, something to not create that situation that you are expecting that will affect you emotionally. Number 3, as coaches all the time, let's say there's a game going on and our player is not playing very well, and you just, there's halftime, let's say it's halftime. You go to the locker room, like, what are you? You've done it before, you can do it again. You have beaten before, you can beat them again. You know what to do. This is like this is like this. Don't you remember? Blah, blah. They're like, oh my God, yes, right. So in a way, you take their attention and you make them focus on the things that they should be focusing. And that's how a lot of times we see teams coming out, because the coach will set them up and they come out of the locker room very differently, because before they were scared about what's going on. They were, let's say, in a basketball game, 20 points behind, and then they come out after the locker room We fight like lions. Okay, so that's something that we can do to decrease our negative emotions and increase positive emotions and affect the way we react. The last two is after something happens, cognitive change. I'm sure you've heard that, and I'm sure probably you've said other people to do it. We never lose, we always learn. And to use the current example with Yannis Antetokounmpo, when he said to that reporter, that it's a process and it's not a failure, it's never a failure. That's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did. He interpreted the event differently than the reporter. So his emotions are positive about it, while the reporters are negative. That's how it sounded. So we never lose, we always learn, right? That's a very classic example of that cognitive change. And I respond motivation. You got a bad day at work, you lost an important game, something happened, or you're an athlete that is, who knows, something that has affected you negatively. So some people drink. And watch TV or TikToks. I don't know. And some other people do relaxation techniques. They can know that some people go to the gym and just try to take all that over there. In general, what we are trying to suggest is do not go towards maladaptive behaviors. So don't use drugs to deal with whatever negative emotions you have. Try to use something that is more beneficial. That's the best word I can find. Now, can you overregulate your emotions? Yes, because we're not telling you suppress until you explode. We're telling you, or we're telling the athlete, for example, all right, you missed that chance to score. Are we going to analyze it right now? Is this the time? Or we can just compartmentalize it and move on to the next play, because by the time you're trying to figure it out, by the time you may figure it out, you may not, another play is going on, you're going to do another mistake, which will put you in that downward spiral. So we're not saying suppress. We're saying put it aside, and then maybe we'll watch film, maybe we'll talk about it, we'll figure it out, we'll see what happened. We don't want that to happen again. Just don't keep them inside you until you, let's say, reach a point of depression. Okay. And another thing that a lot of us as strength coaches have been kind of accused of is that we are intimidated, right? We have that lack of emotional expression because we can regulate positive and negative sometimes. Emotionally, just both the same. Here we mention it for many reasons, but one example this can be dysfunctional is the expression, the emotional expression communicates some messages. So when we have no expression, it kind of creates barriers to communication. Okay? So let's be mindful about that. Number 3, attention regulation. Focus on what's relevant and just block everything else. How important is that, right? There are many ways that we can describe why is this important and how we can achieve it. Here, we're working with executive function, and more specifically, we are going to operationalize it with problem solving. And this is the process of problem solving. It has 4 stages, and we'll see in which stages and how many of them attention is important. Let's start with number 1. Problem representation. So in problem representation, that's the first step. As you understand, if that doesn't go well, that will affect all other the other ones, the other 3. So here, attention regulation is very important because you have to pay attention in order to identify the problem as soon as possible and define it. So here we have what we call filtering and selective attention is very important. So a good coach will see what's going on, and we will detect the issue. Let's say we'll stop in another play immediately. if something is going on, or you're in your own weight room. If you pay attention, you can definitely find the issue easier. You can define it in a way better. So that is very important. So we need attention for that. Planning is choosing from the alternatives that we have in order to take action. Attention doesn't really play a role here. And then we go to the execution, which is intending and the rule use. Intending is keeping your attention for a long period of time. So being engaged in what you need to do. And the rule use is actually doing what you need to do. So how many times we start something and we get distracted. So attention here, and it takes a lot of energy, cognitive energy at times. We need to keep our attention throughout whatever we need to do. Let's say we bring our athletes in the weight room for 30. And we start strong. The same in the game. You may start strong, or I'm starting a project on my computer, and later on I find myself social media on my phone, like, time is so attention requires a lot of energy, is limited. You can do a ton of things at the same time. So you have to pay attention to what you're doing and keep it in order to be more successful, in order to be more efficient. Keep that focus there. And the last is the evaluation. We have error detection and error correction. Obviously, detection comes before correction. And in terms of detecting an error in the plan that you were trying to employ to solve an issue, again, you have to pay attention to see if it's working based on what you wanted to do and correct it immediately. The more attention you pay, the sooner you can see it and the sooner you can fix it. Can you have 2 months? Yes, you can. Because if you're focusing on a very specific thing from the get-going, you may, so you end up with good decision making. Example, if I were a quarterback, right, when they receive the ball and they step back a little bit, what we tell them, right, is have a wide focus. So it's everything that is going on. Once they detect the solution, as we explained, right, then from wide, it goes into narrow. It goes into narrow. So if it was narrow from the beginning, the quarterback, one, would have lost an opportunity to see another better solution, or to have been destroyed by being tackled from left and right. Right? So that's an example. Just being highly focused all the time may lead to poor decisions. Also, that rigid attention regulation we see there, that can lead to conservative thinking. We want flexibility and creativity. If you are overly focusing on one thing and one thing only, and you are not open to whatever is going on at the same time, because each case that you have to deal with, each problem is not the same. You all deal with different sports. You all deal with different teams. Even inside the same team, you deal with different people. Even in terms of your supervisors, you deal with different people. You can't always have the same kind of attitude towards that problem, attending to the same thing all the time without seeing, first of all, what's going on. So we want us to be flexible. Right? We want us to be creative in terms of the decision-making process. Number 4, buoyancy. That's an interesting word. And if we have any divers, swimmers, I'm sure you know what that is. Here is a little bit different in positive psychology. And we're going to compare it to resiliency, which is different than buoyancy and different than mental toughness. So here, as you can see, is the ability to come back from challenges, but we are talking of challenges for everyday life. We're putting emphasis on that. Now, if you see that table that I created with the 2 columns, you see buoyancy on the left, resilience on the right. And what we see when we compare them is that buoyancy is that bouncing back from something that is not a major event. It happens to most of us. It happens very frequently to us. And resilience, on the other side, is completely the opposite. Atypical event, major adversity, it doesn't happen very often or to most of us. Example, we all deal with a little bit of traffic every day. We're trying to deal with that by living in the audience. And athletes, there's their Achilles tendon, resilience, right? Or they suffer their third or fourth concussion. They need to, let's say, end their career early. Resilience. Okay. Now, this is the important part for us today. We noticed, and after thinking about it, that we thought about it. Let's take it this way. We said, what if we employ more buoyancy? Would it be possible to need less resilience? What do I mean by that? So, can I avoid a major event if I am being proactive and I'm dealing with it in a way proactively every day? So, I need to lose 50 pounds for that wedding. Maybe I said, let's say 20. Instead of waiting for that last week, what if I was losing 2 pounds per week for 15 weeks? The student needs to take a final. And in that final, there's going to be questions from 15 chapters. Right? If they wait until last minute or last night to study, they will have to employ resilience. What if they were studying one chapter per day? So they do every week, one chapter per week. That's what I mean. So what we're trying to do here is to teach ourselves and others that a lot of times, the more buoyancy, the less resilience we'll have to improve. And that's an important lesson, right? We should try to avoid major events, because major events are major stressors and can be catastrophic. So we have to change a little bit our mindset and attack it day by day, little by little, step by step, and avoid the big event. Just try to confront it every day. Now, can I have too much emphasis on buoyancy? Yes. Because if I only know how to attack little stressors, at some point a bigger stress will happen. I won't be able. So here we have a red thing now. We are trying to avoid major events and employing resilience, but at the same time, we need to be ready. So you may know people that if you give them a minor stressor, they're fine with it, but horrible with major stressors, right? For example, they're very good with practice every day, but when the game comes, not so good. Okay, although they've done really good. We also have people who are very good with major stressors, but not so good with minor. So we have those players that are very good with the games that matter, let's say in the season, but they don't get really motivated with games during the season or even practices. So now what we're trying to achieve is understand that, yes, more buoyancy for less resilience. However, we also need to be ready resource-wise, and major event, because a major event will happen, because that's life. Success mindset. So here, and I want to say that the vast majority of you scored really high on this one, which was expected, and it was expected also that you will score very high in general, which you did. I'll get back to that in a minute. So success mindset, desire to do something and actually do it, right? And on the left side, I have put a picture of the Paris Marathon, because I want to make a case about stamina and power. is a marathon. We'll see how we're going to get there. So let's start from the left. So achievement or performance is based on two things: and talent, and we can argue that you either have it or not, right? And effort, which is something that we can control for the most part. So effort now is comprised of three things: intensity, direction, and duration. And out of those three, intensity is the one that we can detect, evaluate easier. We can go to our gym, the weight room, and see an athlete going really hard, right? Really high intensity. Good. The other two, the direction, which means how many goals you have, and if you are directing all your effort in 1 or 15, and for how long you're going to be doing it, regardless of intensity, it's harder to detect or follow. Grit is direction and duration. And grit is a newer term, different than mental toughness. And grit is trying to shift the focus from intensity to direction and duration. And grit says that if you focus on one thing for a long period of time, most likely you'll be successful. What do we know about grit? We know, for example, that people with higher grit have higher levels of education. If you're not sold that it's working, in finding out in a way why not all talented people are successful, let me give you this example. IQ is our best metric for the talent of intelligence. Correct? Now, this is the important thing. IQ and grit are not correlated. And on top of that, grit is a stronger predictor of success. And you'll be too greedy. And I am guilty of that. I've been trying for years to deal with that. Too greedy people don't know when to stop. They will be the devils forever. Sometimes giving up mentality is part of the culture, and we see that in some of our rituals, right? It's part of the culture. We never give up, never give up. In a lot of rituals, we see that. And we are not smart about it. We say, well, it's not that I'm giving up. It's just this is not working, so I'm taking my resources and I'm investing them in something else. I need to be flexible. I need to be flexible with my resources because my resources are limited. And it's not that I'm scared or anything like that. There's no any it's not that I don't have the strength or the desire to continue. It just doesn't make sense to continue. How can we do that? A lot of times we tell people that it would be set standard before you start. So I'll start this project, I'll start this, and if it hasn't, I haven't achieved this much, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, like 2 years, whatever, then I'll stop. This is a wise decision. And it's wise, and it's kind of protected because when you are in it, a lot of times your self-talk tells you, especially if you are in a culture that people don't give up, that you shouldn't because that's a sign of weakness. And that's how you end up sometimes in teams that have a culture of that overwork. Like there's no work over life. There's no work-life balance, right? And that self-sacrifice. Sacrifice the individuality for the common good and the team, even if there's no, it's not going to happen. You just keep sacrificing for no reason. So we can have super high levels of grit, so we need to be mindful of that as well. Context moments. And that continues a little bit the culture conversation that I just started. So here, you see that we have an awareness of the context where we apply the information that we need. All right, so the theories as well, but we're going to use the theory of wisdom on the left side to explain why we need context and how it can be used. First of all, we have knowledge. If that knowledge is not applied, we don't know how to apply the context that we are, nobody cares. It's not useful. It doesn't produce steam. And that's why on the left side, you see that we're talking about that successful intelligence, meaning that tacit knowledge. We need the knowledge that we can apply and it can be useful towards our goal. Because I can read 100 books about strength and conditioning. I can read better 100 books about strength and conditioning. Can I actually do it? And even if I can do it on the high school level, can I do it pro level, digital? And even if I can do it on the collegiate level, can I do it on a lacrosse team and then on a swimming team? So the context, how I'm applying the knowledge is very important. So as you see in the wisdom theory, the arrows are going from left to right. We take that tacit knowledge, that knowledge that we can apply in order, all the way to the right, you see there's a common goal, right? And let's say your common goal of your family is, for everybody to be healthy and good and have good relationships and be happy, and you're fighting to your family, to your job, blah, blah, blah. So there's a common goal. That's mediated by some values that you have, let's say, honesty, science, punctuality, whatever values you have down there that affects everything you do. All right, good. So after we have that tacit knowledge, we move to the very first triangle. The triangles are all about balance. What are we balancing and how is that relevant to the context? Okay, so we have that tacit knowledge and we move to the first triangle. There we have to balance our interests or interests. What kind of interest? Our interest. So what do I want to do? I want to become a successful strength and conditioning coach, but also I want to be a good partner, but also I want to achieve whatever you want to achieve in your life. So you have different kinds of goals. And then we have the interpersonal. Let's say that's your family, right? And your family may have some similar goals, some different goals about you and how the relationship you have with them. Great. So you have to balance your interests with the family interest because you're part of the family as well, right? Right. And then there's extra person. So there we have the team you're working, the college you're working with, the program you're working for, and they have their own culture. So now it's your interests, your family's interests, and the interests of your job. And you're trying to balance all this and make sense of what you should do in that context, right? And then you take that, you did all that in order to go to the next triangle. And when you go to work, you need to decide because we have three options, right? We're going to adapt, meaning that it's not exactly happening what I want, so I need to adapt to the culture of my job, right? Or I will shape, which means I will try to change the culture at my work based on the balance of interest that I just did, or I will select something different. I'm going to leave this. This is not based on how I decided to balance. So whatever I have, first of all, as I said, I need to have that tacit knowledge, with the knowledge that I have to apply in that context. And then I have to balance my interest with my family interest in the context of my job, and then take it there and make some decisions in that context, either gonna change my values, my interest, try to change my job, or pick something. That's explaining why the knowledge of the context is very important to the theory of wisdom. Can you be too knowledgeable? Here I have two examples. One is you have that much experience that unfortunately you don't see its problem as an opportunity to add knowledge, but you think it's the same and you're trying to apply whatever you know, even if that situation is new and unfamiliar. So you depend too much on your prior knowledge. That's one. The second one is you know too much or that much that you don't know which piece of information is appropriate for this case, and you end up doing nothing. So again, too knowledgeable or too much of knowledge of the context or context knowledge can be detrimental, can be negative. Self-efficacy. Let me get some. Cheers. So self-efficacy is what I believe I can do. Is that important? Definitely. Why? Because my actions depend on what I think I can do. Not only in terms of self-efficacy, in terms of mental toughness. Because most of you, on average, score yourselves really high. So you think you have high mental toughness. Does it matter in terms of your behavior if you really are or not? So I'm making a little bit of a side note. Because perception leads to action. We act based on our perception, whether it's right or wrong. Would it matter in terms of results? Yes, because if we are not what we think we are, it will show up. But in terms of action, if I think I can do something, I'll do it. Now, if we bring it in self-efficacy, do I want to have high self-efficacy? On average, for the most part, yes. How can I increase my self-efficacy for others? One is the master experience, meaning that the more I wait in the example, the more I do well, the higher the confidence I have for myself. And that's kind of important, especially when we have somebody new in our staff or somebody new in our team. We don't expose them in something that at the beginning they start losing. We want to build them up little by little, but we want them to internally win, so we build that self-efficacy. Vicarious experience, I can live through others. So, for example, if somebody that looks like me, same gender, same race, from the same neighborhood, same socioeconomic profile, achieves something that I would like to do, then I would probably think that I can do it as well. And the more close we are, meaning the more similar we are, the more I'm going to think I can do it. So that's another thing. That's why a lot of times, in terms of vicarious experience, we can say to our team, well, if they lost from them, again, they're worse than us, we can definitely beat this team, right? So that builds self-efficacy right there. Social persuasion, we do that all the time as coaches, right? And I explained it before in emotional regulation. We can build up a player a lot by telling them that they can do it, believe in them, and support them. We build their self-efficacy. Be careful, because we can also do the opposite, right? We can just bring them down with our words and our actions. And the last one is the affective and physiological states before something that is challenging. Some kind of let's say game. We're going to have some kind of, let's say our heart rate is going to go up, we're going to start sweating, secretion of adrenaline, which kind of makes sense. The more I see it as facilitated to my performance, not debilitated, the more I'm going to grow myself efficacy. And all the time we're trying to teach our athletes to see that anxiety, that pre-competition anxiety as something good. Don't take it as something bad. Take it as your body telling you that, let's go, we're ready. It is time. Let's show it. Instead of, oh my God, that means I'm not ready, I'm going to lose. Now, on the right side, if I have self-efficacy, why do I care? What can I do? Well, high self-efficacy will change the way I think. If I think I can do something, I will think about it a lot, and I will think about it a lot intentionally to find ways to do it, to fix it, the problem, whatever, to find a way to be successful. So cognitively, it changes the way I behave. Second, motivation. Motivationally, the more I think I can do something, the higher I'm going to be motivated to do it. If I can do that, I can make that stuff, the more motivation I will have to take that stuff. Right? The last one, affective, not the last one, the third one, affective. The higher the self-efficacy that I have, the less stress and depression I'm going to feel before, let's say, the big game. Because I will think that I have what it takes to deliver. So I won't be stressed. And the last one, selection. High achievers achieve higher. So if you think you can do, achievers are gonna change also what they select. What do I mean? High achiever. Somebody who has very high self-efficacy is going to pick the higher. Why? Because for them, it's not higher. That's what they do. They think they can do it. It's just something. So the more I think highly of my abilities of doing something, the more challenging problems, cases, scenarios, shots, heavier weights, longer distances, whatever I would pick. Now, can I have too much? Yes, I can. Because as I said before, if I think too highly of myself and I'm not that confident, then that, and most likely an underestimation of what is required for this situation, will lead to poor performance. Self-efficacy is situational confidence. So again, if I wrongly think that I can do something and I don't take that something seriously, that happens a lot of times. Okay, it's like we were overconfident. Shouldn't have lost that. We went in there thinking that we're going to destroy them. We didn't pay that attention, and boom. And the last one, number 8, adversity. Why am I going to talk about adversity? Well, the better we know what adversity is, the better we can prepare. So the proactive side, but also the better we can react when it happens. In terms of health, this figure that I created in a way compiles 70 years of adversity research. And I will try to explain everything in a few minutes. So what is it about? So first of all, adversity or stress, are we going to talk about it, is the difference between our resources and the demands for the situation. So if I think that I have the resources for the demands, I'm not stressed. If I don't think that I do have them, then I am stressed. That's the most classic and probably the easier way to explain it to somebody if you want to talk with your athletes. Now, does stress or adversity create disease? Data to say that. What we do have enough data to say is that if you do have a disease and you have more and more and more adversity, that will wear you down faster because they will hit you at a point of time in your life that you are more vulnerable. Do all people stress or face adversity the same way. No. And one of the reasons is that's why we're here, because they have the resources, aka mental toughness, and they can face that adversity differently than the person next to them. Although it's the same thing that's going on, it's same to both of them. Randomness is adversity random. Let's think about it first. For the most part, unless we're talking about nerve, it is. So I didn't gain those 50 pounds by accident. I was doing something every day that led me to that. Right? This shouldn't be surprising because I never warm up, I drink, sleep, I never do anything in terms of recuperation, I drink a ton of alcohol every night, and so on and so forth. Then, if there's a lot of adversity in your job environment, is it random? You chose that. Work to know what's going on before saying yes, let's say to that offer. So what that says is, the literature says, is that had we, like, if we are proactive, that's the main point. We can avoid a lot of adversity. So most of it is not random. This adversity is more in sentence is the one that really it's your core identity. So if I'm a coach and something affects being a coach, that will be the one. If I'm an athlete, whatever affects you, if something affects you as a partner, or as whatever you think you really are in your identity, that usually is what affects you the most. Just me, it's very situational, very personal. What's worse, chronic or acute? For the most part, we say like something that lasts a long time. Although sometimes, again, when something is chronic, we adapt to it and we know how to deal with it. And also the recurring kind of adversity, like injury or pain that keeps coming back. That's nowhere between. It's no chronic. It's in no acute either. So that's something in there that can be troubling because it comes and goes, but not often enough to get used to it and adapt, but still enough to mess with our regulation. Multiple or individual events. It depends. You can have an individual event that can affect you for years, and multiple events that can affect you for events. When we talk about multiple events, we can have events happening at the same time, or events that happen in chronological order. So I get fired from my job, I move to another city that leads to a divorce, that leads to alcoholism. So it depends on how we see it. That's another way. Timing is really important. A great example is losing. So everybody is going to lose it. However, it's different kind of adversity and it will affect differently person if they lose their parents when they're 5 compared to when they are 60. So that's something that we need to know. And again, when you make your athletes or everybody who's working under you to be exposed to adversity, make sure they're ready. Right? It's different that I miss my 30th penalty kick in soccer than losing my very first penalty. That will affect you. So make sure you're exposing me to something that kind of will increase my self-efficacy and not destroy. In the last one, we have differences in terms of adversity, meaning that the genders are facing different kinds of adversity. Usually, face adversity that has to do with some kind of it's oriented towards some kind of achievement, and this is more interpersonal. we have different gender socialization. So have that in mind. Can you overcome too much adversity? Facing adversity and overcoming adversity should not be the goal. So if there's an end goal, we go from A to B, as I said, and there's adversity. Yes, learn how to deal with most of the problems that are common towards that. Let's say that's an important game. You have to deal with all the things that you think that will stop you achieve that. Great. But don't do it just to do it. Because, again, there's a higher probability for that adversity, especially if there's no reason, to find you in a vulnerable place, especially as we see time, frequency, amount, type, like they come all together like a lot of adversity, really high density to find you in a vulnerable place in your life, then take you to the other side. And the last one is superiority. Superiority meaning that because you have the experience, you have dealt with this, you have worked in 5 teams, 10 teams, whatever, 10 programs. Now you have, it has affected you in a negative way, meaning that you will try to put yourself up, put everybody else down. You're not very, you don't welcome criticism. So it has affected you in a way that you think that you're better than others instead of being more humble and using that towards your enemy. All right, we finished a little late. Congratulations. As we go here, finishing up, I'm bringing up again the MTI, and I'm reminding you how we did the baseline, and we had a control group and an intervention group. You see there are 2 weeks in between the administration in both groups. The only difference is in the blue group, the intervention. In step 2, we gave them 1 video to fix supposedly whatever low score they have. And this is what we got. Right? And when I said low, what do I mean by low? We tried really hard to find people that had any scores from 3 and below. Really hard. So in the very first week, we sent it out to 375 of you. Actually, we sent it to everyone. 375 replied. And then the intervention group, we sent it out to everybody that had at least 1 item with a score of 3 or below. 18 replied. And then we sent it again to the rest of you, and 202 replies. So our control group now is 202 and our intervention 18. And you see how the scores went. The difference is that those blanks that you see is because we have those 2 weeks in between baseline and week 2 for the control group. And at the bottom, we have 3 measurements for the intervention because week 1, we send them the video and the MTI again. Week 3, we send them just the MTI to see if whatever effect that was, if they retained. And here are the results. Blue is control, green is intervention. We see the scores of the MTI, and then we see baseline week 1, week 2. What do we see here? We see that the control pretty much obviously was higher, right? And it stayed there. And then we see a big jump in the intervention after we gave them the video. So from 40.5, it went to almost 44. Is that significant? As you see on the right side, it is not only statistically significant, but also practically significant. You see points D 73.6, very large effect size, which again means not only statistically significant, but practically it would make a difference. So the videos worked. Thank you. Because we have using with athletes, and this is the very first time we're using with coaches, and we are very happy to know that this intervention really works. Now, another thing that we were interested, that's why we sent it again 2 weeks out, was to see that if that effect was retained. It's called retention interval. And it actually was from, it went a little bit up, it's the same, let's say. So what does that say? That says that once we do an intervention, at least for 2 weeks, we have to do nothing. Because the effect of the intervention is there. Now, I don't know if the intervention lasted for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. For now, what we know to tell you is that for 2 weeks, it's super good. That makes us really happy. Let's bring him on. This is what mental toughness is. right? As we are pursuing both, it will help us, give us the skills to face the adversity between where we are and where we're going to go. Good news, it can be developed, right? And since it can be developed, it can lead to more success. More is not always better. The mental toughness index that we use is a very useful tool that you could use yourselves if you want to. It's free, and those videos work. Now, whether you were in control of the intervention group or you didn't participate at all, it doesn't matter. Use that QR code. It will lead you to all 8 videos. Now, there's a playlist. You can use it for you. You can use it for your athletes. But the resource is free for all CSCCa members, all the coaches. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you. You're going to have to answer some questions to get the CEUs. These are my professional social media if you want to connect. Again, very thankful. Thank you very much. Hopefully you learned a lot. If you want to learn even more, please reach out. Thanks again.